Today's webinar is hosted by Endeavour and GP Support North with special guests Blue Moon, and our topic is on Dynamics GP container management and Dynamics GP chargeback processing, showing these two different applications and add-ons for Dynamics GP. We'll also extend this to show what it looks like in Business Central, if anyone has future plans to move to Business Central in the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years, or never. Endeavour does support both Dynamics Nav and Dynamics GP, as well as Business Central and the Dynamics 365, and all the rest of the cloud products. So our agenda, as per the calendar invite, why and how, and looking at a live demo for each. And over on the screen with us is Janice, and Amy's in the background. So Janice, I'll let you go on to the next screen and introduce yourselves.
Okay, great. Thanks, Scott. Well, we appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys today about a couple of our products, container tracking and chargeback processing. And as Scott mentioned, we've got Amy and myself on the line. Amy will be taking any copious notes for any questions, also getting back to you with any information that you need after the webinar as well. So to move on from there, he's showing a demo of each product, and as Scott mentioned, we're going to also give you a sneak peek of our Dynamics 365 or Business Central product. And then after that, if there is some interest in that, we can go into that further in a separate conversation. You can just contact us and we can give you that roadmap for our products. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end for any questions that you might have on anything that you see today. So from our perspective, just starting with the container management product, our container management product works in conjunction with your vendor purchase orders to give you the ability to track one or more purchase orders, some or all of those purchase orders on a particular shipping container, and track that progress from the originating dock really to your doorstep. And what that does is it adds not only the capability of combining multiple purchase orders, for example, on a single shipping manifest, it also allows you to combine multiple manifests on an entire shipment. So if you're shipping products where you've got multiple containers worth of product coming over, we can track the individual content of those containers as well as the overall shipment that's being sent to you. But more importantly, this also gives you the ability to track all of the dates that happen with those manifests, so that when you have this situation, often you're trying to manage when it's going to get to you, because certainly customer service and other aspects of your company are probably waiting for those products to come in. I know I have a car on one of those ships and it's now been gone. It was supposed to come in February. Now it's March. Now it's May. So if you're on customer service and you're waiting for products to come in on that container, then getting regular updates of those dates are really critical. And our product allows those dates to filter down to the PO line level so that users can see the most updated information about when this product is going to be in your warehouse and available to sell. So that's one of the things that we'll be showing as part of the demo today. And so, as I mentioned, you've got the single or multi-container capability. You've also got the ability to track all that additional information. You've also got a number of user-defined fields to track. But then as well, there's all of those pesky shipping costs. So there's freight costs, there's often insurance, there's broker fees, there's consolidation fees. And often those fees or landed costs need to be spread not just across a single purchase order, but over the entire shipment. And if that's a 1 container shipment or a 10 container shipment, that can be pretty tricky. So we add the ability to apportion your landed costs across the entire shipment. And you can do that either by the standard Dynamics methods of weight or units, but also we add cubage. So in other words, how much space the items are taking up in the container. We've had a number of customers using our system where they've got very large, bulky items like pieces of furniture that might be lightweight, but they take up a lot of space. So by nature, they would like them to take up more of, or take on more of the landed costs because they are taking up more space in that container. So we give you some additional capabilities for apportioning out those landed costs across that container or shipment. So, why container management? We consider that sort of an easy question to answer, because if you need to track these multi-container shipments, or you need to track multiple purchase orders on a single shipment, there really isn't an easy way to do that in your standard Dynamics GP system. So this will give you that capability. We've also found that it's not always overseas containers these days. It might be a truckload that you might be moving across the United States, rather than moving it, let's say, from Asia over to the United States. So there's a lot of options. So don't feel like if you aren't using it from the pure definition that it might not help you. So there's a lot of iterations that we see in using the product. All right, so let's take a look. So I'm going to turn off my camera, and then I'm going to go over to my Dynamics GP system, and we'll take a look at container management. Okay, so I'm using a Microsoft Dynamics GP 18.4. Our product is compatible with a number of different versions of Dynamics GP, so please certainly reach out if you're not on the current version of Dynamics GP yet interested in container management. So I'm just going to go into purchasing and kind of set the stage. What I've done is I've created a few purchase orders already in the system, and I'm just going to go into purchase order entry, and you'll see that I've got quite a few purchase orders in here, and these are just standard Dynamics GP purchase orders. So for example, I've got these items here. And then again, this is just your standard Dynamics GP window, nothing different about that. And you would just create your purchase orders in the same way you do today. If you use any other tools to import your purchase orders in or to initiate your purchase orders, that's fine. As long as they end up as Dynamics GP purchase orders, then we're fine with that usage. Then from there, you would start building your containers. So we've added a manifest entry window here, and this is part of the container management product. And this is where you would start to build your container. So we give you a numbering system to keep each one of those containers unique. But also, if you're familiar with this industry, you'll know that typically you do get a container number from your freight forwarder or your consolidator. So we give you that ability to track that container number in here as well. As you can see here, there's a number of user-defined fields we give you, and also as you're starting to build those individual containers, if this is part of a larger shipment, you'll be able to tie that back to the shipment. So if you have 3 or 4 containers that are part of a large shipment, you'll be able to link them together using a common shipment number. Now you'll notice, if you're familiar with Dynamics GP, you know that required fields might be bold and black, bold and red. They might have a number of different characteristics, but you'll see here that there aren't a lot of required fields. And that's not because we don't think they're important. It's because we know that this is often an iterative process. You might start a manifest and know a few details, but you might not know the vessel yet. You might not know the forwarder yet. You might not know all of the dates yet. And so we don't want you to be in a situation where you can't start completing this this window and putting the data in here that you need before you have everything. So we want to make sure we give you that flexibility. What you'll see here in this container type ID is a few standard containers that we have in the system. If you need to put in more container types, you can do so. And then what you can do here is just build off of that. So what you'll see is this will give you the ability here to, as I select a container, you can see that it'll give me some information about how heavy it can be and what the square footage is of that particular container. And what that's going to do, if you need it to, is to start to tell you, as you start to build the container, how full it's getting and how heavy it's getting. So this little thermometer will start to move based on gaining that information based on the container type. So in some cases, our customers do have the ability to drive how things are packed and what is packed into a container. Some of them do not. They're sort of at the mercy of whoever is packing the container on their behalf. But either way, it's information that you may find helpful along the way. Also, things like your freight forwarder and your agent and vessel, these are all things, again, pieces of information that may be useful down the line. So we allow you to just look up and make a selection from your vendor list. You can also set up all of the different agents that you might have in the system that you're working with, an importer or a forwarder or a consolidator, and you can put their information in here as well, and then select from that lookup list as you start to build the container. And again, often we've found recently that knowing the vessel and the vessel information sometimes can be critical, especially if there is an issue or there is some kind of storm or something. You're trying to pinpoint where that particular vessel is, and you can identify port of origin and entry, which is often needed for documentation. And again, a lot of this information you might not know. You may never know, or you might not care. So in that case, we are allowing you to put this information in if you want to, but also if it's not something that's pertinent for you or just not something that you're interested in tracking, it's not something that you are required to complete. The dates are something that we find are really one of the most important areas of tracking this manifest. In this case, let's say it's expected to ship maybe by the end of, let's say, April, and then it's supposed to get to us by the 15th, and then it's supposed to get, really moving towards closer to your dock door, and getting to your particular office by the end of May. Now what happens here is when I hit that date, that ETA date of the date it's going to be at your dock, getting into your warehouse, it will ask you if you want to use this as the promise date. So for all the PO lines that we start to put into this container. So that way, if someone's looking at an available to promise inquiry, or when is this item going to be coming in, and any inquiry where that data is shown, it's going to be updated with the data that's coming in from this manifest. So I can say I can select the lines that I want to have this date on. And then what happens with this revised ETA date is, as this changes, so let's say it's coming in early, it's coming in later, whatever that might be, either way, as we revise the ETA date, it will ask us again if we want to roll that down, continuously keeping that date updated. Once we save the manifest, that original ETA date will become disabled so that you can measure from that. Another way that you can measure performance from the vendor, the consolidator, the forwarder, to see, every time we ship with this particular agent, it's late. Every time we ship with this particular agent, we're early. So you could start to get some measurement tools on how the vendor performance is for these containers. And then the next step is to just build the containers. And over the years, working with different customers, we've found that there's all different combinations. There might be situations where you are putting in an entire purchase order. I pick the purchase order. Everything from this purchase order is going on this container. I can say insert all, and now this bottom part of the window is starting to build our container contents. So now I've got 144 units expected on this container already here. Now that might be true for this purchase order, but maybe not for the next one. And you'll notice that these are vendors, different vendors for different purchase orders. Again, it's really up to you whether you want to, whether your organization has a single vendor per container, or if it could be multiple vendors in a single container. That's really more of your decision than ours. We allow it so that if you do have a multi-vendor shipment, it will allow you to build that with multiple purchase orders from multiple vendors. And then also what you can do is you can build part of it, part of a purchase order. For example, maybe only this item is going into this container. The others didn't fit, the others are not being shipped in time, whatever it might be. You can also put in an item and put part of the quantity in there. So if only, let's say, 5 of these are going into the container, I can say that there's 5 of those here, and you'll see that that line will still say that there's 20 that haven't been received yet, 15 are unassigned and still expected, but not on this container. So whatever combination you need in your business to put together these containers, you could do so. And again, it's really an unlimited list of different purchase orders and then quantities on those purchase orders. So you can just build that as needed, and then once you have all of the quantities here, you'll see that list of all the purchase orders and line items and quantities that are expected on the container. Now, sometimes this is not as easy as a demo. Maybe you don't know everything on the container yet. You're putting it together, you're going back and forth. Then in that case, you can save it and always come back to that container and make some additional decisions, add items, move items, etc. So that's the building of the container. And at this time, often you don't even know what landed cost might be on the container. You might be, in those early stages. You also have the ability to change the status, create user definable statuses and say, hey, this is a manifest that's in progress. We haven't put it on the water yet. It was held up at customs, whatever it might be. Again, another tool for you to use when analyzing and reporting the status of your containers, and also being able to create reports and such as Power BI dashboards. You could put together SRS reports, you could put together smart lists, because all of this information is going to be part of your overall Dynamics GP system. So once the manifest is ready to go and it's going to be put onto the water, you have some options. Often what happens with these purchase orders, when they get put onto the water, then they are actually owned by you. So they might be owned by you, but they certainly are not in your physical warehouse. And if they're not in your physical warehouse, then you can't physically ship them to a customer. However, they are physically owned by you. So that's what they're trying to, you're trying to measure that. We give you the ability, if that is your situation, to do what we call an FOB receipt. Now, this FOB receipt capability allows you to do one of two things. We have some options. One is if I press the FOB button and I have told the system that my FOB is going to create an inventory transaction, what will happen is all of the items that are on this manifest will now be received into an in-transit location site ID in inventory. And that will give you the ability to see them physically in your inventory module in an in-transit site. And then subsequently, what you'll see is that when those items physically do arrive at your location, you will be able to, we will facilitate the transfer of those items out of the in-transit site and into the purchase order site. In other words, your warehouse. Now, for many customers that we work with, that's exactly what they need. They want physical receipt of the items, they want a physical transfer into the actual warehouse, and they want these transactions to go through their inventory module. We also have a group of customers that say they want the value captured of these items that when they're put on the water, but they only want them captured in the form of a journal entry, accruing basically that inventory in an inventory general ledger account, on the water inventory, in transit inventory, something like that, with the offset going to an accounts payable accrual, to just show the value of that inventory, but not putting it into a physical location. So that's a setup option for us, so that when you set that up, and we work with you and Endeavour to see these, to walk through these implementations, we'll talk to you about that and understand what your requirements are so that we can set that setup option for you. In my demo system today, I have the FOB process making an actual inventory entry into the in-transit inventory site ID. And so what will happen here is when I tell the system I'm ready to do that, I can put in any landed cost estimates that I have in order to get that costing in there as well. And I can select my freight, my duty, whatever the items are that I need to be tracking about this particular shipment. I can put in the amount of that cost, and you'll see that I have that choice here of cube in addition to the value, quantity, and weight, which is the standard apportionment methods that are in Dynamics GP today. If I go by the cube, then I do have the ability to, at the item level, set up that cube, the cubage or the dimensions of the item, so it knows how to do the calculation, or I can simply use the weight, quantity, or value option as well. So when I choose the FOB option, what this is going to do is it's going to go in and create a transaction for me in the receiving transaction entry window. And you have the option, once you're live on the system, to have that automatically post all the way through your purchase receivings. And what would happen if you were automatically posting is, as soon as that process occurred, you would see green plus signs here. Now, the yellow dots mean that the batch is created but not posted yet. And I did that for our demo purpose so I can kind of step you through that process. So this is saying, yes, we created an FOB receipt for this. And then when I come out to my purchase order batches, what I'm going to see here is a batch that, oh, I think I left my window open there. Apologies. When I go into the purchasing batches window, I will see one with a prefix on it here, and I can go in and take a look at my batch. Now, another option I had was to put the prefix on of this batch to be my user ID. So that's why I've got the SA on the front of that. If I did not want it to be user specific, it would simply have that CM container management prefix on the batch ID. So when I take a look at this batch, what I'm going to see is a transaction here for each one of my vendors, because if you recall, I had 2 different vendors purchase orders on my container. And then what it's going to remind me is that this is an FOB receipt. And what it's doing is it's putting the quantities that are on that particular container into my inbound, outbound site, or my in-transit site. Mine happens to be called IO, my site ID. And it's going to post those in there. It's doing the calculation for the landed cost. And so now it's going to receive those into that particular site ID. And it also now would make that shipment available to then be matched with a subsequent invoice. Because the other side of this is that very often, as soon as those items are on the water, you have to pay for them. Even though it could be weeks or maybe even months before those items physically arrive at your doorstep, it's often that as soon as they're on the water, you have to pay the invoice. And that can become a tricky situation in standard Dynamics GP. So I can just post my batch here, and then that will update those transactions, put them into that in-transit location, and then, of course, make those receipts available to be matched with an invoice. Now, once this is posted, we're going to go back to the manifest and take a look there, and it is updating all the items on that particular purchase orders. And then if I go back to my manifest and pull that manifest up, then what I'm going to see is I'm going to see those green plus signs. So now it's saying, yep, this has been FOB. The FOB that receiving has been done. It's posted, and now it's just waiting for that actual match against the quantity when it comes in. Now, this will kind of sit here until that happens. You could certainly update your dates along the way, and then now the items have been received, let's say, into your warehouse. So once they come in, if they were, in some instances, I find it is exactly what was on the original manifest. They received everything perfectly. You can come in and say receive all, and what that will do is it will set the quantity received to that quantity. So that will give you exactly quantity expected, quantity received. Now, it doesn't always happen that way. I understand sometimes you get more of an item, sometimes you get less of an item. And what will happen is you can put those numbers into here. So if you did actually get, let's say you got 32 of these and you only received 40 of these, it's going to ask you, did you want to go back and update this on the purchase order? So you could go back and update that quantity on the purchase order. If you go back and we'll put that back the way it was, and you'll see that that X will disappear. Or if you received less than you wanted to receive, it will also warn you. So the system is keeping track of those items as they are actually received so that it can keep in sync with the various purchase orders that you have. And then once that receiving is done, you will go and post this manifest. Now, if it was perfect, what would happen is it would create a transfer for all of these items and transfer them out of that IO site and into the warehouse site that was on the purchase order. If it was short, then it will still reverse the quantity that is in that in-transit location, but it will also put the quantity that it should into the appropriate location. So we will make all of the appropriate entries to adjust those quantities to the actual received results. And then at that point, those items are then available to be put into a sales order or shipped, or you'll receive the back order received reports, all of those pieces of information that you need in order to be able to properly now go in and allocate those items to orders and sales orders you would be able to do. So, this is the process of walking through the entire manifest process. You also, certainly along the way, you do have a number of different inquiries at your fingertips here, and you also can use tools like the Smart List to create your own different reports that you might need. So if you wanted to look up an item, for example, and find out which containers it's on, you could look up a single item and then see if it's on any open manifest, to see if it's on any historical manifest. So it was on the manifest that we just created. If I look up another item, that item might be on 3 different manifests, or maybe one that's open and then 2 that are historical. So you can look for those items however you need and to find out where they're located, and then drill right down to the manifest that they're on and get that status. You also have the ability, and within tools like the Smart List, to create specific container management detailed Smart List queries that you might need. We've had some customers that have been transitioning from very complicated spreadsheets along the way, and when they go to the spreadsheets, they want to have all these different records in to track everything about that particular container. So they can use a Smart List to put all of these data elements onto their Smart List. They also have, and you will also have, user definable fields. So in the setup of the container management, you'll see that there's also some user defined dates where you can change those labels that we saw in the date fields. There's also checkboxes, text fields, and numeric fields that you can add into the system if you needed some additional data elements to be tracking those containers in your organization. So that is really the walkthrough of the Dynamics GP container management product. I'm just going to go back for a moment to show you the Business Central container management. And so this is a product that we are getting ready to release. It does have all of the functionality that we've been talking about on the Dynamics GP side. And this is a screenshot of what it looks like in the Dynamics BC or Business Central product. You do have that ability to create the data elements here on the right side here, the manifest itself with all of the different items from all of the different purchase orders and assembling that in order to produce those individual containers. And then you also have the ability to then have a multi-container shipment by adding all of those different container manifests onto this shipment entry window. So the functionality that you've seen on the Dynamics GP side is pretty much replicated in that Business Central side. So if that is something that you're looking to do down the road, and some of these tools like this are tools that you want to make sure that you will be able to continue to use, you will be able to do that. The container management product is very similar to our Dynamics GP product. So the next item that we want to talk about in the next product for today is we're going to switch over to the customers and the sales side, is our Chargeback Processing product. Now this product is I guess I would say it's unique to any customers that need an easier way to create what they call it. Some people call them adjustments, some people call them chargebacks, sometimes they call them unexpected credits. And what happens is if you're using or working with large retailers or we found a few other industries that are using this where you're getting adjustments to excuse me, cash receipts when they're coming in the mail. So credits that you don't know about until you get the payment. What happens with these adjustments often is the retailer will ding you, I guess, for compliance errors, for charging them freight when you shouldn't have. They might take a credit for a return, but they haven't returned the items to you yet. They might get a monthly allowance for co-op or advertising credit, and they just add these into the cash receipt when they send it, netting it out against the invoices they're paying. And in their system, in their minds, these invoices are paid in full. But often what happens is that they appear to be short paid, and then you end up with all of these little tidbits open on an invoice when you get a payment that has short paid, sometimes hundreds of invoices. The other thing is that you can, and I'm using sort of air quotes for that, you can dispute these with the retailer, though sometimes that is not really worth the time and effort. But if you do want to dispute them, it's important for you to know what type of adjustment it was, how it was entered in, what that reference number is for the adjustment. Otherwise, they typically won't talk to you if you don't know all of this information. So what we've done with our Chargeback Processing product is we've allowed you to have an ability to enter a one-step window where you're putting that cash receipt in, you're putting the chargebacks in, you're applying any credits. You've got a very nice one-stop remittance window to take care of all of these transactions, so that if you are working with these major retail chains or something along these lines, you will have a very straightforward way of getting the information in without sacrificing any of the details that you need. So we're going to take a look at that over in Dynamics GP. So we're going to shift from the purchasing over to the sales side. So again, just to set the stage, we've got a customer who has some outstanding invoices. The customer has made a payment on those invoices, but the payment is the payment itself is a lot less than the number of outstanding invoices that are going to be paid. So from our Chargeback Processing product, we do have the ability to set up these different adjustment types. So for example, as we were saying, there's a number of different reason codes. In this lookup window, you'll see that, for example, some of the retailers, such as Target, use a standard numbering system. A 22 is this, a 44 is this, a 59 is this, and they code their remittance over to their vendor with this information as to why they're not, or why they're taking an adjustment, how much it is, and what was it for. In some cases, we have customers using alpha characters for advertising co-op, compliance, freight adjustments, taking a return on an RMA before returning the item. So there's no formal return credit waiting for them in the system. So there's all types of ways that this can be configured. And then if I select one of these, what we've done in our system is we've allowed you to track the code so that you could report on advertising co-op. You could say, suddenly we have a whole bunch of compliance errors. Maybe our labels are not up to standards and they need to be reviewed. We had one customer who used this to identify a freight problem that they had with a particular carrier, which was costing them thousands of dollars in chargebacks because the carrier wasn't paying attention to which dock door to go to or the times where the dock was open, and they were charging them back for the freight. And so what we'll do here in this setup is allow you to drive the general ledger accounts that go along with these adjustments. So for example, in the case of advertising co-op, it might be rare that you ever dispute that. They get it every month, it's $1,500, they can do whatever they want with it, they've got an end cap or whatever it might be, and you can say, okay, great, we're allowing them to take that co-op. We really would not ever dispute that. So when that adjustment comes through, we're going to offset our advertising expense for their usage of that. In the case of something else like a compliance error or a freight adjustment or something like that, you might say, well, hang on a minute on that one. We are going to always try to dispute this, except maybe on certain cases where we're going to want to say, yeah, I knew this was coming. We're not going to dispute this. If we're going to dispute it, we're going to have it flow through a clearing account while we do that work. And if we subsequently decide that, yeah, we screwed up, the label was on upside down or whatever it might be, then we'll put in a legitimate credit, charge it to a GL account that makes sense for the credit, and then we'll take that debit memo, that placeholder that's on the customer's account, and clear that off. So we provide all of these steps that if you're in this industry or you have this problem, it's a very manual process in the GP system, and we have streamlined that for you and allowed you to make that a very clean process as you're going through. So let's take a look at what it looks like. So I'm going to go back to my transactions here, and we have a window that we've added called remittance entry, and this is in as part of our chargeback processing product. And for the purposes of today, I'm going to be entering this batch and customer information in manually, but we do have import capabilities here to integrate from EDI systems and other imports that you might have of this cash receipt information, so that it is not required that this get entered in manually. I just want to walk through a manual entry today for the purposes of our demo. So I'm just going to put in my batch, and then I'm going to select my customer. And then immediately you're going to see any outstanding and unapplied credit memos and invoices that are in the system. I'm able to put in the amount that they physically paid us. Their payment was $65,714.12, and that could be, of course, cash, check, credit card, or EFT. And I'll put in the check number. And then what I'm going to do here is on my remittance or on my check stub, I'm seeing that they've paid about $80,000 in invoices with this, because they've done a few things. They're going to be applying these 2 credit memos to the payment, and then they've also got some adjustments that they're adding, some chargebacks. So I'm going to go into the adjustments window, and this is where I can add those adjustments. So they have co-op. They've got co-op for January, and February that they're going to be using. So I can put in these amounts, and you'll see that as I go through here, some of the fields will complete for me. So I can say, I can put my date in here. And then I can also track if this was related to a specific invoice. Just for reference, I could do that. So maybe the freight was being adjusted off a particular invoice, but often it's way past that. They might have paid that invoice already, and now they're disputing the freight later. It's really kind of an interesting phenomenon that happens with these retailers. So we can put in our advertising co-op. They gave us a compliance error on a particular document. They put in a $2,000 credit that they're taking for that. Now you'll notice the checkbox did not mark on that one because compliance errors we will research, so we aren't necessarily going to agree that this is correct yet. However, when we're working with these retailers, the retailer is saying all these invoices are paid in full, so if you're going to dispute it with us, then they would have to dispute it using this reference number. So now this reference number is going to create a document on the Dynamics GP side as that placeholder while we do that research. And then either the customer is going to need to pay that debit memo because we determined that they cannot take that chargeback, or if we subsequently determine that they were right, we can put in a valid credit memo and clear off the debit memo with that. So I know it's a lot of debit memo, credit memo, GL, and all that jazz. We certainly, if this looks like something that you want to pursue, we'll be happy to do an in-depth demo with you and your team to make sure that we get all that information, properly sifted out for you. But you'll see I've got $9,000 here that when I say save comes up to the front window and says, hey, here's what I've got now to spend, let's say, on these particular transactions. So now instead of my $65,000, I've got the plus that $9,000 in order to come up with my applied amount. So the first thing they've said on that remittance is that they're taking those credits. Now you'll see I actually have now $80,000 to spend, if you will. I've got $80,000 to apply against these invoices. So as I go through here, I can apply these invoices. And then what I see here is now I've applied the invoices, paid them in full with the combination of using the cash that they sent us of the $65,000, plus the $6,000 in credit memos that they took, and plus the $9,000 in the sort of unknown credit memos that came through as chargebacks. So right from this single window, I've been able to put in those accounts, put in those different adjustment types, apply everything against each other, and I can go from here. Now, there are more features so that if, for example, they short paid an invoice and there wasn't a credit memo for it, you can create an adjustment on the fly. And we also, certainly, as you saw in that adjustments window, allow you to have an unlimited number of different adjustment types to keep track of all of these reason codes that might be coming up on against these invoices that need to be paid. So now what happens here is I can save this and post this, and what this will do is it will pay in full all of these invoices, which is their customer's intent. So Contoso is saying these invoices are paid in full. Based on our chargebacks that we entered in, we're going to be putting back on their account another $6,000 in potential invoices for them to pay, knowing that we're going to do our due diligence and ensure that, to try to find out whether we actually did have a compliance error or not. So I can just save this and go on to my next remittance. I can go back to my batch, just like in standard Dynamics GP. I can come in here and I can post that cash receipt. And then once I post that cash receipt, what it's going to do is, oops, make that a selection here. That's going to go in and give me what I need in order to post the transaction, get that information into the system, and then also create those debit memos back on the customer's account so that if we do need to research that, I am able to do that. So in addition to having that transaction in the system, I do also, once those transactions begin to process, I have the ability to come in here and look up the chargeback reference, to look up any remittances that I have in the system and be able to go in and review all the data that are in those remittances. So I can see that I've applied all of these different invoices. I've got the chargeback amount here. I can drill down on the chargeback amount and see all the different chargeback codes that were used and the amounts of those chargebacks. And I can also even go back to any invoice that's on this transaction and drill down to that transaction as well. Oops. And get that information out. So I do have that full drill down. I also have the ability to go in and create smart lists, SQL reports from the data that's in the chargeback processing module. So if I'd prefer to come in and look at that in a smart list, I could create various smart lists and then certainly still be able to drill down to either the remittance or drill down to our chargeback reference inquiry and get back to any transactions that I have in the system with the cash receipt processing, or back to those unallowed chargebacks that create those debit memos while we're doing that research. So this really allows you to take what is, if you have this situation, a very cumbersome operation within not only Dynamics GP, but in real life, and give you that ability to have better tracking and better analysis of the individual chargebacks, be able to process that transaction in a single remittance window where you don't have to first go apply the credit memos, then come back and put in the cash receipt, and then put in the transactions that go against it, or worse, leave all those invoices short paid with that amount while you do that research. It gives you the ability to tie that all together, to track it with the information like those different adjustment codes, and to give you a really robust ability to track all of that in your system without having to use external spreadsheets or another system or something like that. So we've worked with this product for many years, and as I mentioned, we've also integrated it with other systems like EDI systems that would be integrating this payment information in. So then again, that would make it even more streamlined, because you wouldn't be creating those chargebacks necessarily. They would be created automatically for you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Just on to, for those that are new to Endeavour and GP Support North, I've been around for over 30 years now, focusing on Dynamics GP, advisory services, implementations, and ongoing upgrades and support. The advisory services team are fantastic in helping you map out your processes, and including Blue Moon and their variety of add-on products for Dynamics GP. And as mentioned at the beginning, we also support Dynamics Nav and Business Central, as well as Dynamics 365 CRM and the cloud products. On to the next slide, just for final next steps. Reach out to Trish, James, or Steve. You can find them online or here, and we're happy to help you out best we can to meet your needs, and we'll pull in the Blue Moon team as needed for additional deeper discussions, demonstrations, as well as price quotes. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.